Oh! Oh!
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
My pleasure.
It's your public. Thank you.
I'm so glad to be in Brazil. We're having the best time. Great people, good gamers, a lot of excitement. What a great party we're having. I think games caused some of it. I want to talk a little bit about history. It's actually not that far ago, and you guys have no clue who these people are. This is Dr. Evans and Ivan Sutherland, who, this picture was taken in 1962. Believe it or not, that rack of equipment that you're talking about was a video processing board. All of it. I worked in an amusement park in college. Yeah, that kind. And I played with this computer at college and played a game called Space War. And it was a game that was done by a guy named Steve Russell, who I considered to be someone I stood on the shoulders of. And it was a rocket ship flying saucer game on a vector display. You're seeing the product of a $1.6 million computer in 1970. That's a lot of money. But he wasn't actually the first. The very first video game that has ever been heard of is one called Tennis for Two. This is a guy named Willie Higginbotham in New York. And it was done on an oscilloscope with relays and capacitors. And it played a pretty good game of table tennis. Even had gravity. Then there was a thing called Computer Quiz, and that was a trivia game, but it had no computer. It was a slideshow. Then came this product. This was my very first game. I molded the cabinet in 1/10 scale out of clay, sent it for fabrication, and designed a computer that could play computer space. That's all it could do. It was like a signal generator. And the model in the brochure was actually a stripper from a bar down the road. But that's a whole nother story. Syzygy was actually what we started it. And when we went to incorporate, we incorporated as Atari. Then we did the game called Pong. That was Atari's first game. And there's actually two innovations here. One is the Pong game, and the other is my polka dot shirt. My polka dot shirt did not catch on. This is Al Alcorn. And Al Alcorn was probably one of the smartest engineers I know, and he actually did the circuitry for Pong. And used to always make him mad because he says, Bushnell, why do you constantly hog all the glory? I said, I say that you were the guy who actually did the circuitry. He said, but they always want to give me credit. And I said, and finally I had to record one of the interviews and play it back to him for him to believe me. Atari, of course, did all kinds of fun games. And then we did the Atari 2600. When we designed the software, or the hardware for that, we thought that the total number of games that we could ever program for the 2600 was maybe about 16. Then we decided to call it the 2600 because we thought maybe we could go up to 26 games. And of course, the magic of software allows all kinds of things to happen. 4 years later, there were over 350 games programmed for the Atari 2600. And I think that we ended up way over 500. One of the questions I like to ask audiences is, there were only 128 bytes of memory. Not 128 kilobytes, 128 bytes, because memory was very expensive. So then ask yourself, how did we do a chess game? 64 spaces, 32 pieces on each side, you know. Turns out that you could split the bytes into 4-bit bytes and get enough information. But anyway. All the games up through 1978 were state machines. Now, a state machine is actually a big digital signal generator. If you wanted to put a different object on the screen, you actually had to put some digital counters and wire them up and solder them in place. They were not von Neumann architecture. There was no programming. Zero, zilch, nada. And it wasn't until the 6502 that software started to work. And we built it around the 2600, used the 6502. And do you know what else used the 6502? The Atari computer and the Apple computer. Let me go back and talk a little bit about that. I had a good friend and employee called Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs offered me 1/3 of Apple Computer for $50,000. And I turned him down. You can't get them all right. You just can't do it. I actually had a chance to put the first venture capital into Cisco, which I did. So that was pretty good. But I would have put more, but I decided I thought that a big pizza parlor with a mechanical rat would be a better idea. It's okay to be a little crazy. It works. Anyway, people have asked me a lot of times, well, what about Jobs and Wozniak? First of all, both Wozniak and Jobs had a tremendous sense of play and a tremendous sense of enthusiasm. And it's important to know that creativity and play is really, really important. And so when you start thinking about what to do with your life, the first thing you have to remember, never, ever, ever grow up. Growing up is the death knell to creativity. You know, you basically need to be standing on one foot all the time, a little bit off balance, a little bit crazy, and always looking for fun. And pretty soon you'll get creative and everything will be wonderful. Enthusiasm, creativity, and optimism will drive the future. And if you don't climb on the enthusiasm bandwagon, and you say, well, I wake up and I feel crappy. How do I get enthusiastic when I have to go to a crappy job and do crappy things? Come home to a crappy wife. Oh, no. It's all changeable. And what's more than that, it turns out that if you trick yourself into being happy, just walk through and say, I want to convince everybody that I'm not really this down south guy, this really crabby woman. I am going to convince the world that I'm happy. Do you know what happens? You end up convincing yourself. What is one of the characteristics that made Steve Jobs successful? He was creative, but you know what else was really important? He was a very, very, very hard worker. How many of my employees did I find sleeping under their desk when I came in early on a Monday morning? Not many. Did he kind of smell bad? Yeah. That's because we didn't have showers. And if you didn't go home for 2 or 3 days, you can get gamey. Stephen Woz worked for me for, well, let me be clear. Wozniak never officially became an employee of Atari. But he was good friends with Woz, and with Jobs, and Jobs was. And I thought it was really great. I got 2 employees for the price of 1. There's nothing wrong with that. And so, in some ways, I'm one of these guys, I kind of believe in karma, and that what goes around comes around. So when it came time that they wanted to start their computer company, guess what they made their computers out of? The first 100. They made them all out of Atari parts. I gave them to them. That's why the Apple II was based on a 6502. That's why the modulator that fits into the back of every Apple II was designed and manufactured by Atari. We had fun. And you say, but you came along with the Atari computer. Well, yes, we did, but I felt that the marketplace was big enough for all of us. And it turned out that when I sold the company to Warner, who had kind of a record company mentality, like, let's screw the creatives and hire a bunch of attorneys. That's kind of the metric. Atari, when the computer came out, and I'd left because I got tired of the guys, and plus, when you get acquired by a big corporation, when the vice presidents and the presidents and that of the big corporation come by, and you tell them that they're as stupid as a sack of rocks, they don't like you very much. And I was a little bit irrepressible at the time. Anyway, Atari had actually a better computer than the Apple II by quite a bit. We had an integrated chip, we had sprites, we had a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, the Apple II was really hacked together with old Atari parts and a pretty good design, but we had a better one. Why did Apple succeed and the Atari computer fail? Steve hired software evangelists. Atari, with the Warner mentality, went around and said, if you write software for the Atari, we will sue you. For the first 3 years of the Atari production, third-party software development was unknown. Remember, this was the computer business. Nobody knew what the rules were yet. And they didn't realize that computers, nobody buys hardware. You only buy software, and then you have to buy the computer that it runs on. Because the software is the only thing that makes it happen. We figured out early on that we could advertise the 2600 and nothing had happened. But you advertised a new game, bingo, the doors would blow off. I hired Jobs and Wozniak to do the game Breakout. And they did such a good job. And there's actually another story there, but I won't go into it. Read the Isaacson's book. But it turned out to be the game that launched the Japanese home market. Nintendo actually knocked off Breakout as a consumer product in Japan before they did the Famicom and that sort of thing. So this became a very, very important time. And Jobs asked me if they could add Breakout to the Apple II as a piece of software. I said, sure. So every Apple II had this product with now believe it or not, the early Apple IIs you'd load with a cassette tape. Remember those? That was really lame. This is Jobs and Woz in their first location. I don't know why I put that in there. Jobs and I spent a lot of time in Paris. And I had a house there, and he came to the housewarming, and we hung out in this cafe. And this cafe was where we basically decided that Apple should really become a significantly multinational company. Jobs was very, very concerned about proprietariness and that sort of thing. But probably the Apple II wouldn't have come to Brazil as soon as it did if it hadn't been for the conversation that we had in this cafe in 1987 or 8, something like that. Fun times. It's Dumago. It's on the west bank of Paris, and it's great fun. Okay, enough of history. What's going to happen tomorrow? What are the really cool things that are going on? Well, I believe that anything that has totally been done before and is no longer done should be done again. I believe that things that have never been done and that you think of and they sound crazy, you should definitely do. Now remember, one of the messages that I always told Steve, I said, Steve, if you come up with an idea and 99% of the people think it's a crazy idea and 1% think it's a cool idea, and that 1% is you, pursue it with all vigor. The more revolutionary the idea is, the fewer people will think it's cool. Remember that. When the airplane was invented, the Wright brothers, everybody thought it was a toy, a whimsical thing, even cars, the telephone. Why would I want to talk to somebody that I couldn't see? Just because it isn't you don't have a constituency doesn't mean that it's a good idea. Some of the best game ideas I've ever had that have turned out to be monster successes have had nobody want to buy in on it. Actually, Breakout was one of them. None of my regular engineers want to do it. And so I pushed it off onto Jobs. Let me put another trick. Imagine going into a bank or a venture capitalist and saying, I've got this great idea for a pizza parlor. It's going to be 10 times bigger than any pizza parlor you've ever seen. It's going to have a whole bunch of games, and it's going to have talking robotic animals. Does that sound like a cool idea? Well, it didn't. I had to basically fund the first few myself, and I could. But if I hadn't, Chuck E. Cheese would have never happened. Oh, Versix is an arcade of the future, and it's about several rooms connected, games in each of the room that are part of a story. One of them is a laser maze. You ever wanted to do that? It's actually pretty fun. Against the clock. Another one is where you can get to play button walls and twisters, stepping on invisible and vanishing mushrooms. I mean, haven't you ever wanted to be the frog in Frogger? Of course. Of course. So you're going to be able to do that. We'll be having them shortly. One of the big trends that I think is going to be huge in gaming are the electronic glasses. This is an artist rendering, and this is a real one that's being worn all around Mountain View, California by Google employees. They got about 200 of them. And you say, well, what is that? It's a heads-up virtual display. It's not bad looking. What do you see? I'm not sure if that. But more than that, you can see you can see the gaming opportunities in that. The other one that I'm really hot on is this one. What is it? A stealth fighter? No. It's called the Oculus Rift, and it's a 3D, totally censored set of eyepieces. And the latency is so low that it's highly probable that you will, for the second time, get into virtual reality and not get seasick. This stuff is going to be really big. And if you're thinking about developing something, this puppy is important. They're going to have developer kits out very, very shortly. I believe that this is going to be the next big wave and the next big thing, so get on it. The other thing that I'm looking for and I want is any of you who are uber geeks, I want micro mesh networks. I want us to all be able to run an app, PC, tablet, cell phone, and immediately have a network established so that we can all communicate with people that are within our range of sight. I think there are huge numbers of games that you can play in a subway car between stops. You know, in a setting like this while you're waiting for the speaker to show up. All of these things can be enabled by a good micro mesh network. Why? Do you guys know the game Hacky Sack where you hit the thing? Why don't we have a cell phone Hacky Sack? That'd be fun, wouldn't it? I think so. Anyway, I also believe that there's going to be games for health. And there are a lot of sensors that are coming along. And when Mario is running around getting hit and pulvered and that sort of thing, you see his health running down. Well, wouldn't it be interesting if you played a game and if you played it properly, your health would actually start to get better over time? So now the score is your actual blood workup and your fitness and your metabolism. Might be a good thing to do. Okay, let me talk to you about, wait, that thing pops, huh? Anyway, my current project is BrainRush. Video games teach faster than any other medium ever invented. by a factor of a lot. It's at least 10 and maybe as much as 20 times faster. We're currently in front of 100,000 kids in the United States teaching Spanish vocabulary. Next year it'll be Portuguese vocabulary, but right now it's Spanish. The kids who are using our software 10 minutes a day outperform the kids who are not using the software by a factor of 10. Typical Spanish class, they have a vocabulary of 150 words. Our kids end up with a working vocabulary, that is listening, hearing, spelling, what have you, of 1,500 to 2,000 words, 10 minutes a day for a school year. Fact, in the can, documented. So, what's happening? I look for confluences. The perfect storm is some software, cheap hardware, robust networks, and brain science. We're learning so much about what makes people tick and what makes people learn that we will be able to teach 100% of the last 4 years of school in about 6 months. Now think about that. You'll have time to play a lot of video games, or learn a lot of creativity, learn entrepreneurship, learn how to program. The step from playing games to designing games is vanishingly small. Go from playing to modding games. Modding games, pretty simple. From modding games, you can start doing an awful lot of things, teaching yourself some simple programming. Python is really a pretty easy language and pretty powerful. JavaScript's a little bigger problem, but very powerful, and it's something that as you learn a little of it, you can get pretty good at things and keep on learning and increasing your skills. I think JavaScript right now is one where everybody should start to dabble with it. Just dabble. Just dabble, dabble, dabble. And before long, you'd be surprised, it starts to make sense to you. It's one of those characteristics. In 5 years, we're going to be able to teach everything using this. This includes medical school, law school, high school, elementary school, 10 times faster. It's going to happen, trust me. You know, and one of the reasons is this simple chart. In 20 minutes, only 25% of the class is paying attention. I know that you guys have never daydreamed in school, but I sure did. Everything above the curve is wasted time. Unless you're teasing the girl in front of you or something like that, some other worthwhile pursuit. If you get a chance, watch a TED Talk by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And he is the guru of happiness. And it turns out that you're maximally happy when you're stressed right up to your edge, and it's really hard, but you can just do it. Kind of like leveling up in video games. That's why video games are so addictive, is because they're happiness engines. You are really, really happy when you're completing this level and knocking off the boss or whatever it is. What we're dealing with is thalamic engagement. That's the thalamus, the red thing. Sits at the top of your brainstem, and it turns out that you don't remember anything if you're not using your thalamus. So when you're active in what you're doing, it's sticky. And that's what the brain science is around BrainRush. I like this quote because if there's anybody who could have felt down in the dumps. It was Winston Churchill during the Second World War. But he maintained enthusiasm. He drank a lot, maybe that was the reason, but pulled it through, made it happen. You can build your brain all kinds of ways. Look at how creative we're born with. And look what happens. Don't grow up. Keep your child mind. It will make, I mean, you still have to brush your teeth and do some of those things, but, you know, keep your child's mind. Be playful. Keep your creativity. This does not work. Remember the innovation cycle? Never think that your first solution is the right one. But start it anyway. Modify, fix, and test. We all know who this guy is. And I miss him. But what we want to do, and I've just finished a book called Finding the Next Steve Jobs. It's about how you hire, deal with creative corporations and companies. Now, for you who are not currently running a company, I suggest you buy the book because it'll teach you how to cheat when you want to get a job as a creative. Okay? So, remember, every game there's a measure and a countermeasure. But more than that, it might give you a lifestyle because focus on your enthusiasm every day. Every day. I love what I do, but I do things differently. And quite frankly, writing a book was not something that was on my radar screen. But I had to do it because the dice told me so. And every January 1, I put down all the things on a piece of paper. Well, I do 11 of them, of what I don't want to do. Then I throw the dice and have to do one of them. And it's really magical. Because when you do something that's outside your comfort zone, you're maximally impacting your brain. And you're building your brain, you're building your brain. And so, all of a sudden, I said, okay, I have to write a book. The first book I wrote was a science fiction book. It's called Video Games 2071. And it's a science fiction book about what video games will be like in the future. And it's pretty cool, but it's really crappily written. And I got to the point where I wanted to publish it, and I was looking sort of for a publisher who didn't mind my bad grammar. And he said, no, but you've got to write this book because you're the only person who can. You know, because you know about creatives, you dealt with Steve, and all of a sudden I've got a new career. It's fun. So this is what we're doing. Here's just a bunch of rules. Do things different. Look for intensity and be intense. Really focus on what you're doing. Really live in the present. Go for it and be happy. You advertise creatively. Weird stuff. You know, like in Chuck E. Cheese, we said, make dough, make dough. You know, they made pizza and they made money. And certain people got it and some of them didn't, and that was okay. This sounds funny. You don't want to hire too many obnoxious people, but a few of them are okay. Because Steve Jobs was pretty obnoxious, and yet pretty capable, but companies should be able to handle a few outliers. And there's some people who are obnoxious for a reason, They might be obnoxious because they're right, and that's kind of what Steve was like. But sometimes they are obnoxious just because that's the way they were built. And then you put them on the night shift. Physical movement. It's turning out to look like sitting 8 hours a day is worse for you than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes. So my suggestion is that if you keep moving around, you can start smoking again. No. No, it's a thing where treadmill desks, stand-up desks, get off your butt. And it turns out that you will actually improve your gaming by just standing while you're playing. Okay, double-blind test. These were 16-year-old students taking academic tests. Half the class got an extra half hour to cram. The other half exercised aggressively. They took the test. The kids that exercised did 15% better. Cramming wasn't as important as getting their brain going. And it's been repeated over and over and over again. So the best thing you can do when you're going into your exams, get your heart rate up for at least 20 minutes before you go in. And you'll find that your grades get better. Here's one that is difficult because it's a trend and it's not already here yet. But basically, I never cared if any of my employees had graduated from high school, let alone college. I would hire based on their hobbies. I would hire based on their intensity. I would hire based on their passion. As you know, Jobs didn't graduate from college, dropped out over, with less than a year. Gates as well, Michael Dell as well. But more than that, here's the reality. On the web today, you can learn faster than you can at any university. But what it takes is discipline. If you've got discipline, train yourself. If you don't, maybe the university is the right thing to do. But really focus yourself. Did you know that the prime architect for the Atari 2600 was a high school dropout? Dropped out of school when he was 16, was self-taught, was brilliant, highly creative, a guy named Steve Mayer. Joe DeCore, right next to him. 1 year of college, brilliant, capable. These were, I had Berkeley engineering graduates that were really great. I had even a couple of PhD in engineering. Nobody gets a PhD in engineering, but they did. And so it's a blend, and you have to read what you do. But I think that today, most businesses, particularly creative businesses, don't care. It's what you can do, not what your certificates are hanging on the wall. Games, part of being kid-like. You redefine failure. How do you do that? You basically say, what did I learn from this? It was really successful in finding out that this was really a bad idea. Really, if you redefine what failure is and find it as a learning. For example, I lost a whole bunch of money chasing the robotics business. If I don't do another robot and succeed, it will be a failure. But right now, I know an awful lot about what doesn't work in the robotics business. Toys, same thing. But let's talk about what the real essence of creativity is. It isn't thinking. It isn't researching ideas. It's doing. People who do are considered creative. Look at Jobs. The Apple II was not the first personal computer. There was inside. And he was going to do a kit, and he just did it a little bit better. The mouse and the graphical user interface, that came from Xerox. He didn't invent that, but he perfected them, made them better. What about the iPod? There were MP3 players all around. What he did is create an infrastructure so that non-technical people, because an MP3 player was really hard to get music on. First of all, you had to steal the music or rip your CDs, which was hard to do. He built the ecosystem, and all of a sudden, and he put it in a cool design, and the iPod took over. And then all of a sudden, people were carrying their iPod around, or the iPod around, and they had their cell phone. And it didn't take a rocket scientist to say, we could put those things together. My cell phone and my iPod belong together. Oh, and if we get a screen that's a little bit bigger, I bet we could play games on it. Now, let's think of some other having accelerometers on it was clearly a leap of innovation. I don't know where it came from, but really a cool idea. Multi-touch touchscreens was not developed by Apple, but it really made it happen. You know, so spread and pin. So a lot of this stuff is about just doing. And so when I say just do it, I mean it. Just start programming something and put it out. And don't worry about it if it's crappy. The market will tell you when it's crappy, and nobody will know if it's crappy. But everybody will find out if it's really good. And that's really what you want to do, is you want to iterate, change. Here. You may not know this, but not only did I turn down a third of Apple Computer for $50,000, I have designed some real stinkers of games. About a third of my games that I've designed are unplayable. Didn't know it until I got them coded up, but they are really bad. And they seemed so good when I was in my brain. Like I've never had an idea I didn't like. And just do it. BrainRust Labs is a division of my thing, and we can test how long it takes you to learn anything. And so what we're going to be doing is figure out these items. And we'll find out how much sleep you need, whether you should have a high-protein breakfast based on what you're going to be doing. And I think it's different for everybody. How much coffee? Lots. But it turns out, you know what you're, this is going to sound really creepy, but you should all have a snack sometime between 10 and 11 o'clock. And it should be dark chocolate, green tea, and a sardine. But not necessarily together, I don't think. But it turns out that the sardine is very good for your brain. Dark chocolate is very good for your brain. Green tea is very good for your brain. And you should always, between meals, use that as something that floods your system with some of the right things, and you'll be smarter. Anyway. I've been working on a project that is important for Brazil. It's called Exaporia Studios. And what it is, it's a game, college, and studio wrapped in one. And it looks like we're going to have some participation by the government in which we will be able to teach game development in a college environment. And while you're going to school, you will be working with some of the great designers in America as project heads and as professors. And they will come down and teach, and that you'll be actually working on their projects. As a student, you will be slave labor, but not quite, because you'll be learning, and you will be getting a portion of the success of the game. So if you knock it out of the park and you get a new Halo, it could be pretty good. And I think that this combination of college and studio, in which so look forward to this, hopefully in the next year or two. And that's it. I love Brazil. You're great people. Thank you for inviting me.
Open up for questions.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a translator, so if they ask the question in Portuguese, you can hear in English.
Perfect. Okay.
Here's the translator.
I am going to
If you want it.
listen to encrypted messages in Portuguese, and I'm going to answer them. I'm going to answer them in English, and that will be fun.
Ops. Tem voluntário aqui com os microfones, não? Tá aqui, ó. Por favor, levanta a mão aqui, o Guilherme vai fazer a ordem aí. Quem preferir fazer a pergunta em português, o tradutor vai traduzir. Se você preferir fazer a pergunta em inglês, por favor, avisa antes que vai ser em inglês para ele poder tirar o fone de ouvido, tá? If someone does the question in English, you have to take it off.
Yeah,
Okay, and
I can.
All right.
Oi, tem muita gente hoje em dia no mercado que aposta que o mercado de consoles, que começou mais ali pelo Atari e tudo mais, tá prestes a morrer. E que o que vai ter agora vão ser mais só PCs ou então games na nuvem, essas coisas. Você tem alguma opinião, alguma coisa sobre pessoas que acham sobre essa ideia de que os consoles estão morrendo?
The question is, what do I think of, will the consoles die? And I kind of think they might. I love the PS3, I love the Xbox Live, and they're really good entry machines. And I think that there will be a place for them. What I don't believe is that there's an important need for the next generation. I think the Xbox will be there for a long time, but I don't think the Xbox 3 or the PS4 makes much sense. Because if you really look at the graphics now, it's pretty damn good. And to increase it by twice, you increase the power consumption and the heat by a factor of 4. It's a square law. I just don't think the economics make sense. So I think the big hot PCs for the really go fast thing is probably where you go. You choose.
Alô? Tá. Vai ser em inglês a pergunta.
Okay.
Here. Hello, Mr. Nolan. My name is Sebastian. I'm 33 years old. And first of all, I want to thank you very, very much because I played video games the first time when I was about 2 years old. That was 31 years ago, you know, about according to my mom. And it was in an arcade video game, and some of those little cars running around some kind of maze, you know. And that changed my life. That changed my life. That made me who I am now. I really do love gaming. And so I want to thank you from the deep bottom of my heart. And I think I talk in the name of most of guys here. So after thanking you, I want to ask you about that Exaporia Studios you were talking about. You say there were some plans with the government, and I want to know if you have some kind of data or some due times or something to tell us about of when it's going to happen, or if it's something concrete. Thank you.
I was actually asked to start this kind of a project. Well, let me back up. A couple of Middle Eastern countries came to me and said, we need jobs for our young people. We need entertainment industries in our countries. How do we do that? And I said, games, unlike a lot of things, are hard to teach in the abstract, but very, very easy to teach hands-on. And so I developed this curriculum, this methodology of combining a game college with a studio, and it's really I've worked through the financial structure and things, the sort of stuff that you have to do, and actually the sort of stuff that I've kind of gotten good at in the little while. And so it occurred to me that Brazil would be a wonderful place to do the same thing. And I believe that if I were to put a wager on it, and yes, I am a wagering man, I think that there's about an 80% probability that it'll exist within the next 2 years in Brazil. Maybe two of them, one in Rio, one in Sao Paulo. I believe that there's a 50% chance it can happen within a year. Governments don't always operate as quickly as you think they can. But I've talked to a lot of the great designers, and some of them are getting a little bit older and would love to come down and teach video game programming in Brazil. So I'm highly optimistic. Thank you. Hey, we could do a big collaboration. It'd be, it's a campus party, campus college game studio.
Hello, my name is Kyle. My question is, I heard a lot about games changing the world, and they say that that's because games can make people flow. Games engage people.
Thank you.
The great challenge for education these days is engaging people. So I want to ask you, do you really believe that we can change the world with games, that we can transform the reality in a way it looks, feels, and you can experience it more like you experience a game?
Well, understand that what games are a simulation of life. And it doesn't, you know, it makes, when you say, can life influence life? Well, yeah, it can. Can games influence life? Yeah, because there is really a lot of power in an idea. And unfortunately, there's power in bad ideas, but there's more power in good ideas. And if we get it right, we can in fact change the world. I think we already have changed the world a lot. And I really like that. I want the future to happen faster, because I want to live there. You know, and as you can tell, I'm getting older. So hurry up, you guys. I want to live in the future. And incidentally, how many here read good science fiction? Okay. Neil Stephenson. Oh, guys, you got to get some Neil Stephenson. He's got a really fun one right now called RIMD, which is all about virtual worlds, and of course there's Russian mobsters and terrorists and everything, but I really recommend it. The other one, and this is one that I'm surprised, my absolute favorite science fiction book of all time is Hyperion. It's a 4-book set by a guy named Dan Simmons. If you guys don't read that, what a romp. It's really some cool stuff. Anyway, we can change the world.
We're about the top of the hour, but we can keep answering questions as well.
Let's do a couple more.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Franz, and I want to ask you, what do you think about the idea of a learning massive multiplayer game that you play in the real world, outside?
I think geolocation games, it will start in places like college campuses. And there's several of them that I've seen that are pretty fun, but it's more like you kind of have to, they're clunky right now. It's like you have to get a whole bunch of friends and they sort of have to start at the same point. The ones that will really become viral is where they're less clunky and anybody can join, and it's kind of an ongoing metric. And you play over a few days. I think the technology has to be more than just geolocation using GPS or cell tower triangulation. You have to get geolocation inside buildings, and that's really crappy right now. I feel like it's going to be solved in about 2 years, and I've seen some things in some labs. None of them are really good. There's one that looks very promising, and it's about 2 years away.
Boa noite, Nolan. Meu nome é Alan. Eu tenho uma pergunta e meia. A primeira é sobre a notícia que caiu no mundo, né, sobre a falência da Atari. Se o senhor teria alguma coisa para falar sobre. E a segunda é qual seria o videogame, console de todos que foram lançados até hoje que o senhor falaria, esse é o favorito? Boa noite, obrigado.
Not hearing the translation. Huh?
Okay. You think he has a translation? So he has 2 questions. One is, if Atari went down now. The news just came out. So what do you think about this? Or do you have anything to say? And the second one is, From all the time, what's the game console that you think is most interesting?
The Atari BK, think of it as a chess move. Very, very important to get Atari corporately cleaned up. Atari for the last 10 years has been a mess. It was pulled into Infogrames, which was a mess. Infogrames had the ability to borrow massive amounts of money and throw it away. They bought product, couldn't integrate it. I mean, it was like they'd buy company after company, and a year and a half after they bought it, there'd be none of the people there that were left. All the developers would have left, all the engineers would have left, all the graphic artists would have left, and they'd be left with an attorney. That's not a good way to run a business. And anyway, so the company had just piles of debt. And as all people find that after a while, if you keep piling up debt and you want to borrow more, people will say no. And so now bankruptcy cleans that up. It'll divorce it from the French parent. And I think that the stage will be set for the Atari brand to rise again. And I'm hopeful that I can be a part of that. Anyway, and, there's a second question, I forgot what it was. Oh, that's damn Alzheimer's. Where am I? No.
From all the consoles of all time,
Oh, yeah.
which one do you think
Of all the time consoles that I love, I think the very first Famicom was a really good game player. Remember the first Adventures of Link, you know, when it was in 2D graphics. You know, I hate to say this. I'm a real love the one you're with kind of guy. I loved them all. I mean, some of the early Sega consoles, great games, great games. Even the Atari Jaguar, remember that puppy? That was after my time, but it was a quite a game. No, I liked a lot of them. I mean, consoles are less important to me than games that I really, you know, there's certain games that I call shut the company down for a day while we solve this one. And that's happened to me a lot of times. I mean, when Doom first came out, that was a shut the company game down, you know, company down game. Tetris, totally, shut the company down. Let's work on this puppy and let's figure it out and let's get it out of our sync so that we don't go crazy. I think some of the early Sims were shut the company down. The first Halo. Man, what a great one. Command and Conquer, great game. Mario Brothers flying around, doing all that stuff, good, great game. Right now, loving Portal. You guys played Portal? It's a good one. What? Minecraft. Out of right field, when you first looked at it, you said, come on. Are you serious? You know, this is 2012, you know? This, you know, it's like bad graphics on top of crazy gameplay. And then it slowly sucks into your brain. And you say to yourself, wow, there's something here. And then you start figuring out the recipe thing. And you say, That's a little bit like Settlers of Catan, but in video. I can go with that. And then you start, you know, and then the bad guys coming after you at night. That's creepy, but fun, you know. And you do kind of get a little scared, you know, because they're creepy. Anyway, I could riff on that for a while. Anyway, one more? Yeah, let's do one more.
English. As you can see, I'm a big fan of Atari, the 2600. I've played a lot in my childhood. It was my first video game. I'm a single child, so I had no brother. It was like a brother to me. You know? I played it a lot. My question is, as Steve Jobs and Wozniak have the motivation to do a PC to make it portable so they could sell to people, what was your motivation when you created the first video game that you created, when you created Atari? What was your motivation to create Atari?
I think the question was, what was my inspiration? I've been a gamer for a long time, and my inspiration really was the Steve Russell, you know, Space War game on the PDP-1. And in fact, early on, I had a magic notebook. I thought it was magic. And it basically, I bought every book about games I could think of. And I started writing down every game that had ever been invented. Card games, board games, checker games, what have you. And I started to categorize them as to what is the metric, what is the thinking, what do people have to decide? What is the class? And I started trying to put various games in classes. And some games didn't fit in a class. They'd fit sort of between classes. And then every once in a while, you get an outlier. And the outlier, you say, whoa, that's really cool. And it stays an outlier. For example, Sims is a total outlier. There's no real historical game that's like that. Tetris has several antecedents, but not many. Kind of an outlier, kind of putting them together in various ways. And I suggest that if you guys are looking for a good project, categorize every game that you ever thought and try to start and get a big spreadsheet, Excel, what have you, big piece of paper, and start to figure out what types of games have been successful. Then ask yourself, how do I mash something that is successful in this column with something that's been successful here? You'd be surprised what you can come up with. Mashups. Figure it out. Or there's another trick. Plot trends. Like, you know that memory is going to be half price next year. What game is driven by that? 2 years from now, we will have geolocation inside buildings. What's going to be driven by that? Forward think based on trends. And pretty soon you'll have games that everybody loves. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. We'll have some fun.
Thank you very much. Great.
Good fun. My pleasure.
Pessoal, queria agradecer a todos pela participação. Só lembrando que das 9h30 às 10h30, o Nolan vai estar no Campus Business, que fica ali no stand da Telefônica Vivo. Tá certo? Então, quem quiser assinar... Nolan, pessoal, the guys are asking for you to look there. They have the box, the original box of the Atari.
Oh, wow. Hey, that's a 5200. That's the original box of the second game.
Right. Okay. Então, so thank you very much. And
Good. Is there some place where, for picture taking and things like that? Or
So they're going to take you out for dinner, and then they come back for pictures and sign.
Cool.
Okay? So
That
thank you
works.
very much.
Thank you.
And